welcome everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. So just a quick introduction to myself. My name is Ilse, and I am part of the kind of communications and engagement team within what's called the Clarus project that we'll be talking about. I'm joined up here by my two colleagues, Megan and Amy. We were unfortunately meant to also have one of my colleagues, James, who is from the University of Glasgow. He is unfortunately sick today, so is not able to join us. So please bear with Amy and Megan, who have some of James's notes from what questions I was going to be asking him. So they will be kind of covering, but unfortunately we won't be able to go into quite as much detail about his specific things. But if you have any major questions that you want to ask about what James does, when we find out more, please let us know, because we can absolutely put you in contact, or you can email Clarus and we can get those answers to you. So I will pass over to Megan to introduce herself.
Thanks so much. So as Ilse said, my name is Megan. I'm Professor Megan O'Neill at the University of Dundee. I'm a professor of criminology, and my research focuses on policing research. So how best to improve policing practice, how the police work together as an agency, how they communicate and collaborate with the public and other partners. So my focus of my research is very much around policing. In Clarus, I am the research director, so I led the initial proposal writing and application for the project, and now I direct the research that goes on within the project, which we will go on to talk about later. But first, I'll hand over to Amy.
Hello, I'm Dr. Amy Long. I'm the postdoctoral research fellow with Clarus, which is a long way of saying I've got lots of hats to do within the project. So I'm in charge of the data collection within the UK. I'm also assistant to Megan, so I help with the kind of background and things like ethics and data protection. And then my wider research interests, like Megan, is in policing. Most of my postdoctoral work has been in comparative international policing studies.
Abby, thank you so much. So you guys are all here for a discussion on how the Clarus project is pushing for a unified language within digital forensic evidence and digital forensic science. But we haven't talked about what the Clarus project is. So Megan, can you actually tell us what is the Clarus project?
Yeah, absolutely. The main focus of the project is to examine how people work together to collect, process, store, and analyze digital forensic evidence. The main areas of focus for us are around communication, the processes of communication, the systems for how people collaborate, language, what terms are used in a different context, and also the working culture. So within our research, we're looking at forensic examiners, forensic scientists, as well as police officers, police investigators. So we're also concerned about how those groups work together with each other, but also within the teams, but also across teams and across countries. So our focus is not how digital evidence is processed. That's not actually the focus. It's all the communication that goes on around that between the various teams and the language and the terminology they use. The main reason being is that we want to find ways to reduce the chance of error creeping into that process and the chance of bias coming into that process. So people bringing in misunderstandings or miscommunication that might weaken that digital evidence when it then goes through the court process as well. So we have decided to focus on digital evidence specifically for a couple of reasons. One being is that it's quite new, and because it's quite new as a type of evidence, there's not really a set vocabulary around it yet. It's still quite variable. But also, digital evidence is very important now. It's very prominent. So in pretty much any crime that happens, there will be some element of that crime, some element of the evidence that is digital. So it could be text messages exchanged between the offenders. It could be people exchanging images that would be used as evidence in a court. More and more now, crime has a digital component to it. So that was very much why we wanted to focus on that. And then just to give you a brief idea of who else is involved in Clarus, it spans 5 countries. So we have us in Scotland, we have colleagues in Finland, we have Portugal and Greece and the Czech Republic. And that's where we're doing our research, is in those 5 countries, so quite a spread around the EU. We do also have colleagues in Norway, but they're not where we do data collection, but they're helping to do that research. And people involved in Clarus are social scientists, we have forensic scientists, linguists, computer software developers, police officers, forensic science examiners in policing, and community engagement specialists as well. So quite a wide group of people involved in the project.
Fantastic. So Amy, we've discussed that we are studying the communication of digital forensic evidence, but what actually is digital forensic evidence?
Okay, so I'm going to use this time to kind of define digital forensic evidence, how we're using it in the project, but I've also got a little bit of an explainer of how it works in Scotland, just in case you're interested. So the process is that perhaps if your phone is seized, if you're dealing drugs, what you might expect to happen with your phone going through the system. So digital forensic evidence, let me start with digital evidence, like Megan says, can be anything that comes from phone or the cloud or social media or whatever. Digital forensic evidence is digital data or information that's been pulled using specialist techniques from a device where it might otherwise be hidden. So it's acquired from a digital device, be a PC, smartwatch, even a smart fridge, I know has happened, and using processes and tools by an expert. And the other thing that marks it out is that it's recorded and is part of the chain of custody, the same as any other forensic evidence. Okay, so I've created a little bit, it's a very rough draft of what the Scottish system looks like. So we've got kind of the different actors that are involved in the process. We've got your investigative police on the scene and then back in the police station. We've got a digital forensics gateway, which I'll explain a little bit in a minute. And then you've got your digital forensic hubs. So the first thing that happens on the scene is that the police will decide that they want to seize your phone if you're a suspect, or they might ask you to volunteer your phone or your computer if you're the victim or a witness. The legal process is slightly different. If you're a suspect, it will be by warrant, and they can do whatever they want within certain boundaries with that device. So they'll seize the phone, they may put it in a Faraday bag, which prevents the wiping of the phone, so it creates a zone around the phone, stops signals getting in, and that's where the chain of custody starts. What they do is they fill out an examination request form, and that kind of details their justification for why they want to look into your phone, and then they also have to say exactly the boundaries of what they want to look at. So they'll say, between this date and this date, we want to see all the photos and messages, and that creates kind of a barrier to what the analysts are allowed to look at when they've taken a picture of your phone. That request form goes to the gateway. That's a team of sergeants who can say yes or no, like, you're totally, you're okay to examine this phone, what you've justified is correct and legal and necessary and proportionate, or they can ping it back and you get a bit of authorization ping pong where the gateway team says no, you need to justify it more, or you need to ask for something different, and then the reporting officer sends it back again, or it can get rejected altogether. So that's kind of a safeguarding thing that we have in Scotland just now around digital evidence. Once it gets approved, goes through to the hub, through the coordinator, the team leaders, down the bottom. They do their jiggery-pokery. I'm not going to give you details of the things that they will run on it. But in Scotland, we have 4 hubs. They're kind of geographically spread. So we've got the north in Aberdeen, we've got the south in Edinburgh, east in Dundee, and west in Glasgow. So depending on where the evidence comes through, it'll go through to the local team. They'll do their analysis, they'll take an image of the phone, write their report, and that goes back to the reporting officer to send into, to integrate into their investigation or to pull intelligence from. Okay, I think that's enough for that.
Perfect, yeah, no problem at all. Fantastic. So, as you can imagine, that is quite a complex system, and that's just the Scottish system. We are studying there's 5 different systems that we are studying, and they are all vastly different. There are similar areas in each of those systems that compare to the Scottish system, but they are all quite different. So what the Clarus project is trying to do is kind of create like, as we said, a unified language. So this is what is going to be one of the outcomes, and this is the lexicon. So Megan, can you tell us what is the lexicon and kind of why do we actually need the lexicon?
So this is where I have to pretend to be James, so be gentle. Right, a lexicon, so this might be a phrase that's familiar to you. So in a professional context, a lexicon is a specialist vocabulary to do with that field. So medicine, for example, will have a lexicon of words and terminology that's common across medicine, so that professionals in that practice can speak to each other with clarity and everybody knows what they mean. Similarly, the legal profession will have a lexicon that they use in the course of their work. So we're doing the same thing, but for digital forensics, digital forensic evidence, that making sure that professionals in this field are using the same vocabulary when they talk about this area. What's unique about what we're doing is that our lexicon will be multilingual. So there does already exist lexicons about forensic science, forensic evidence, but we don't and within that there are elements that relate to digital evidence. Ours is going to be specifically about digital evidence, and it will be in all 5 of our research languages. So English, Portuguese, Finnish, Czech, and Greek. We did a good job of picking like some of the 5 most complicated languages that we have in the EU. Our linguists were a little bit shocked when we told them what we were doing, but we're up for the challenge. So this is what we're going to do. So as I was saying, there's several reasons why we want to do this. So as I was saying earlier, the prevalence of digital in crime is growing. It's growing all the time. It used to be kind of a side interest, oh, that's nice, there was a little bit of digital, this and that. Now it's everywhere. So it's an emerging field. So there's, for example, when it comes to forensics, there's already really robust lexicons for things like DNA, fingerprints, that kind of thing. Those are very well-established lexicons. Digital is new. But because it's new, it means that at the moment, a lot of variable practice has emerged in terms of what words are used in which contexts. And so this can lead to confusion and perhaps error. Secondly, and that's the other reason, that there's different working practices, different terminologies, and so there's a lot of inconsistency. And for us, because we want to try to reduce miscommunication, reduce bias, this is why we want to introduce a common lexicon. So, what we're going to do next is, assuming this goes to plan, to do a little exercise to demonstrate the importance of having a lexicon. So, please, and this is when my students get really excited because I do this in class as well, get out your phones and join us on www.menti.com, or you can use the QR code. Or I think is that the QR code that's on the seats? That's the newsletter. Okay, we'll get to that later. Ignore the one on your seats. So this is the one if you want to participate in our little exercise.
But as I said, if you don't have your phone on you, that's all right. We are more than happy to take in the room answers as well if you're feeling confident enough to answer.
Okay, so could you please tell us, what does the word acquisition mean to you? If you hear the word acquisition, what do you think? So, and you don't have to put one word if you don't want to, just whatever that word means to you.
Perfect.
So as you can see, we'll start getting your responses.
I do love how these word clouds just change. If you get lots of people, it's hard to actually end up reading them because it changes so quickly, but it does make a very nice picture for us at the end, which is nice. These are great.
Yeah, okay, nice. Thank you so much for all those responses. That's really helpful. So as we can see here, we've got things like obtain, to retrieve evidence, something that is gained, taking control or ownership, retrieval, purchase, something that you receive, acquiring, building. So a lot of these words or phrases are quite similar. So this idea of taking or gathering or bringing together is the word acquisition. Thank you. So this is very, very helpful because in the field of digital forensics, the word acquisition actually means to copy. So it's entirely different to how you would use it in your normal language. Well, not entirely different, but slightly different. So yes, in digital forensics, when they talk about an acquisition, they mean copying a piece of digital evidence. That's an acquisition. Right? So again, this kind of demonstrates why it's important to have a common vocabulary when it comes to this work. So, and we'll go to the next slide to give you a couple of examples. Sorry, James, I jumped in. So, but within the, also just because even within our partners who do digital forensic analysis, there were 10 different near synonyms of the word acquisition amongst our professionals themselves. So to capture, collection, confiscation, copying, duplication, full extraction, imaging, preservation, retrieval, and seizure. So again, similar, some of them slightly different. So even amongst our professionals, there were different interpretations of that word acquisition. So yes, so this shows again why it's important to have a common lexicon. Here's a couple of examples as well. So this is taken from interviews that we did, and Amy's going to go on to talk to you about the data that we gathered. But these are some examples of how terms can be used in a near sort of synonymously. You got them. I got them. Yeah. Okay. Near synonyms. So, for example, we therefore concluded that we should take the forensic acquisition / copy of the mobile phone on the spot, bearing in mind that we would also have to forensically extract / copy the data from the cloud, but we felt that both approaches were feasible. So again, you can see the speaker here was concerned that there might be a misunderstanding of those words, and so we're doing the / technique to make sure it was clear what they actually meant with that word. The next one comes from one of our participants from Finland. So this person talks about, for example, acquiring and imaging are many times used in English. First of all, I am a friend of the Finnish language, and secondly, the term used in law is, and that's a Finnish word, so yes, I don't speak Finnish. And we have made the choice of using that term, which means copying, and a similar word, which means copy. So the idea is that there will be less ambiguity. So again, even our participants acknowledging that word acquisition is complex, and even within their own practice, it can be a bit confusing. So again, so this is why we're building this common lexicon and multilingual so that it can be used in a variety of languages and contexts.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Megan. So we've also talked that we're building the lexicon, but we have to have research data to build that lexicon on and to actually make it meaningful so that we've got enough research data to build a lexicon that will be meaningfully used across Europe. So Amy, would you be able to tell us more about actually the research process and getting the research data for the project?
Yes, so I'm going to combine two kind of topics here. So I'm going to talk about the general data collection for the project, which covers not just the lexicon, but it's data collection and research on like the organisational cultures and the processes of 5 countries, and then I'll go on and talk a little bit about how that feeds into developing the lexicon itself. So our project is huge, it's across European. It's divided into several work packages, and within each work package is different types of data that we're collecting. So the first step we did was to try and establish a baseline of what exactly are the formal structures of digital forensic systems in each of the countries, what's their regulations, their guidance, and so on. So what's written down for each kind of team within the system to follow. So we did that through documentary analysis. We have over 100 different documents, which includes all those kinds of sources, which we've analysed and constructed. It's part of what fed into my very simplified version of the Scottish system. Within our reports, it's a little more complicated than that, obviously. And we've done that for each of the countries and kind of tracked some of the bias that they tried to counter within their official processes. So that was step one. The second step, which was the report that I was in charge of, was to look at, so we know the official structures, how do the people within the system actually negotiate around those structures and those systems? So what do they think about the official systems? How do they make it work on the ground? So looking at the types of informal communications and interactions that they kind of build around these very official, formalised reports and forms. And we found quite a substantial amount of that. We did that through asking practitioners, so digital forensic analysts and police investigators and forensic analysts to do a daily diary over a week. So they kind of, every day we'd send them a little diary entry and they'd fill out, this was the interaction I want to talk about, this is what happened, this went really wrong, or this went really right. And these are my thoughts about communication within that interaction. So we pulled all that together, got it all translated into English, and I analysed that. And attached to those diaries were follow-up interviews. So within each country, in their own language, we had researchers go look at the diaries that got handed in and go in and interview about specific interactions in more detail and really kind of build up a picture of what it looked like for the practitioners on the ground. Again, translated into English and all pushed all that together and came up with a report on practitioner perceptions. And then in the next work package 2, we did a series of focus groups within each country where we brought people from different specialisms within that country, whatever was relevant to their system, came into a focus group and worked their way through a scenario that was about, it was a hypothetical scenario of an attack, which then later escalates into a potential terror or organised crime incident. And then we asked them to talk about, what would your role be in this part? How would you interact with the others around the table, and so on. So we had the transcripts from those. We had four in each country with the different groupings. So we've got all the documents from the formal structures, we had the diaries and the interviews from the perceptions of the structures, we have the focus group transcripts from the focus group, obviously. And so all of that data, as well as feeding into the analysis for the bias and the regional cultures and the structural reports, also then went in English to the linguists to construct the lexicon. So, and it's part of what makes our lexicon distinct is that it's derived from empirically gathered data as well as the formal kind of published data from each of the systems itself. So the definitions that are being produced for the lexicon are based on dominant patterns within all of this data, so the spoken data and the written data. So what they did, I'll tell you a little about what they processed, and this is from James's notes, so forgive me for looking down a little bit. So first, they compiled a database of these authentic written and spoken texts related to digital forensics. So the formal legal documents, research diaries, interviews, focus groups. That created over 1 million distinct words just in the first instance. And so that took a lot of, a huge amount of processing. And 2 research assistants going through all of this data, pulling out distinct words. The texts were translated into English when they weren't in English. To identify terms, they identified single words or 2-word combinations, which occurred unusually frequently in comparison to British English as a whole. So there is a database, which is the BNC corpus, which is used as a comparative database of what the most common English words are. So the terms that pulled out for our lexicon, they had to be compared against that to make sure that they were distinct as a separate lexicon. Frequency and dispersion thresholds don't ask me, but it sounds very important. We're implied. So the terms had to occur at least 5 times and occurred in at least 2 countries in order to make the grade. So there was, certain steps that they had to go through. And this resulted in between 500 and 700 individual items, individual words for the lexicon. So the typical entry of the lexicon, what they're planning to create, would be the word, which would be translated into each of the 5 languages. There'll be a definition in English, and then a list of co-occurring words, words that co-occur with that word within a kind of 5 by 5 window in the text. And then a real life example from each language. So putting the word in context of a type of sentence that it might be used in order to explain the kind of background meaning of the word. This will be on an online searchable database, which will host the lexicon, and they're also creating a manual to go out to each of the practitioners, and that will be translated into the local languages to use. So the idea is that with the English and then the other languages, they can, I think Megan already said, to create clarity in talking across borders. All right.
Excellent, fantastic. So as you can imagine, it's not necessarily a simple project. So Megan, can you talk through, has there been any challenges with Clarus, and what kind of, what issues have we come across with the project?
Absolutely none, it's been perfect. That's been very complicated. No, there have been some very interesting challenges, as you can imagine, with a project this size. Some of this is quite common to large consortiums like this, but some of it is actually unique to us. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, there are 6 countries involved. We have 12 different partner agencies across those 6 countries, and they come from a mix of professionals, so researchers, police officers, forensic examiners, things like that. So that means that sometimes we can have our own misunderstandings with each other due to our disciplinary backgrounds. So for example, Amy mentioned that she and I both work in policing research. When it comes to the issue of data sharing data, this is where police officers and researchers can kind of lock horns. So as social scientists, we want to share data with each other. We want to understand what each other's finding. We want to combine our analyses. We want to get the big picture. Data sharing for police is a no-go. We don't do that. So there's data protection legislation. There's all kinds of restrictions about who can have access to police data. Getting a hold of the documents that we needed for the analysis was extremely difficult. We had quite a lengthy process of getting a data sharing agreement where everybody agreed how and why and when we would share the data. So things like that, just from our different disciplinary backgrounds, has introduced some challenges, but we've worked our way through those. Another thing, sort of an inherent challenge within this project is language. So we come from 6 different language backgrounds ourselves, and we're taking words from these different languages to translate into English, to make a lexicon, to then kind of translate back out to the local languages. So even within that process, there are some difficulties in making sure that the lexicon we end up with will be useful in those other 4 languages. So there is an inherent challenge within that itself. We do have processes in place to make sure that the lexicon that we're building will speak to the professionals in each of those countries. But that also has in itself been a bit of a challenge. So as you can see, translation and communication is very important in Clarus, not only in terms of our, what we're producing, but also just in terms of how we speak to each other and work with each other as well. And so part of how we address this as well is just to get to know each other a bit better, and we have regular meetings, and just to make sure we're all sort of on the same page with what we're doing.
Fantastic. So we are now at the kind of stage of building the lexicon. So what is the kind of next steps with the lexicon, and kind of what's the next steps with the project as a whole?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So When it comes to the lexicon itself, so we're at the point now where the bulk of the lexicon, I think, is there. So as Amy was saying, we have the words, we have the translations, we have the local examples of how that would work in each of the languages. So what we're going to do first is to have our partners within Clarus to check it in terms of their own local practice to make sure that it makes sense. And that's going to be happening within the next couple of weeks. We're going to be doing that. And then after that, we have a wider process where we're going to send it out more broadly to other professionals that are connected to our partners. Again, I think probably using the idea of the scenario that we brought in early on, but just, to kind of say, right, if you were in this situation and you needed to communicate about this, would this lexicon help you to communicate about this particular bit of evidence, for example? So we have a couple of stages of sort of validation and testing for the lexicon. We also, and something we haven't quite touched on yet, is that Clarus is also very, very keen to make sure that what we're producing also speaks to a more general audience. So as part of that process, we have what we call our citizens' juries. So these are groups of people who come from the general public that we meet with. So you're more the expert.
Do you want me to jump in? Yeah, I can jump in. That's no problem. So we have 5 citizens' juries across Europe. We have Scotland, Czech Republic, Greece, Portugal, and Finland. And they are all feeding directly into our deliverables that we then have to send to the European Commission for their approval. So we wanted to make sure that we had the public's involvement within the project because, as you're aware, if a crime occurs, usually it is the public that the crime is taking place against, and therefore when we are building the lexicon, and we'll talk a little bit about the bias checking tool as well within the project, these are going to directly affect the public. Well, these are going to indirectly affect the public because it's going to be the practitioners that are using them, but in reality, we're kind of going from collection of the evidence straight through to the courtroom. Legal professionals will be using these terms as well in like court cases and things like that. So we want to make sure that the public is directly involved from the get-go within the Clarus project. So they have met twice at the moment, and we have the Scottish one is meeting next week, as is the Greek one, and all of the other ones are meeting in the following week to discuss some of the results to do with the organisational culture that the research that's been taking place over the last, year, 2 years now. The first meeting that they had was just a bit of an introduction meeting, but we also introduced them to this scenario, which was scenario Clarusia, which is a fake, which we've created a false crime that has occurred, which is the scenario that was used in the focus groups that was used with the actual forensic practitioners that we interviewed and did the focus groups with. This was so that the public were introduced to the same materials that we gave the practitioners to kind of give them a proper insight into what the research that we are actually taking place. The second one that we have done, we have kind of quizzed them a little bit about their learning preferences, because one thing that we haven't talked about yet, which I will get on my high horse at the end, is we have what's called a massive online open course that we are building out of the research from the Clarus project. So the public will be able to learn from exactly what the research data and the research analysis that comes out of the project through this course, and it will be completely free and completely open to anyone that wants to do it. We also have a professional development course that will be aimed towards policing professionals and also digital forensic evidence practitioners. So we were quizzing them. We were quizzing our jury members about their learning preferences, how long they would want a course to be. So as well as getting them involved in the research side of things, we wanted to get them involved in the outcomes of the project as well. So I will hand back to Megan.
You pretty much covered everything. Okay, well, I mean, the few other things. So yes, we have the citizens' juries. I haven't also mentioned we have a research advisory board, so a small group of professionals that we consult with as well, other experts in this field who aren't directly involved in Clarus. So the research advisory board will meet next week, and we meet with them regularly as well. And yep, and the training we're developing, and I was going to mention the MOOC, you're still on the MOOC. And so the final thing to mention was we have a website and a newsletter. And so I know you've put out the flyers about the website there. So the MOOC, the massive open online course, the MOOC, will be mentioned on the website and the newsletter when the time comes. But you could probably tell them.
Can I actually ask you to chat? We have 3 specific outcomes of this project. It is the lexicon, the massive online open course, and the bias checking tool. We haven't mentioned the bias checking tool yet. So Megan, would you like to chat a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the lexicon can be used both in terms of in spoken word, and written word as well. So it can be used in both ways. The bias checking tool, this is an additional piece of work we're doing, is a piece of software that will analyze written text and inform our practitioners if there's something in the way that text is written which might be biased, which might induce bias in the reader. So it's a piece of software that we're developing that will flag instances or potential instances of written bias. And what we're doing is making sure we integrate the lexicon into this tool so that the words it suggests are those from our lexicon. But the focus of that tool is very much about addressing risk for bias in written form. And that will also be made freely available to anybody who would like to use it. And in the training that we develop, we'll be showing practitioners how to use the lexicon as well as the bias checking tool that we've developed.
Fantastic. So I have covered all of the questions that I have, but I am really excited to hopefully you guys have some questions. We have Becky, she has a roaming mic, so feel free if you have a question to feel free to put your hand up. We have a question over here.
Hi, my name is Basil. I'm working for the last 15 years as an expert witness in digital forensics, and I am Greek. So it's interesting that you chose these countries to work with in those languages. A few years ago, actually, I was contacted by someone from the secret police, and he addressed me with the title of expert in mechanical πληροφορική, which means computer forensics. And I had to look it up because I didn't know what it meant. And it makes sense. I live in the UK. I didn't really care what, because I'm not working in Greece, so I'm not doing any presentations or training, so it didn't make any sense. But the thing that I've seen all these years is that, first of all the translation you are doing from other countries from other languages to English, it's actually translation from English to those countries, to those languages. Most material, most training material, most software is in English. The training is in English. The concepts are in English. The other countries translated that. So you're looking now to reverse engineer what they translated 20 years ago, or 15 years ago, or 10 years ago. I work with Interpol in a project called Project Leader. It had to do with providing digital forensics training to 8 Southeast Asian countries. And one of the most interesting things that came out is that most of their officers and even more of the prosecutors did not speak English. Okay, so they were there in an English-speaking training course, and the forces sent them as their best experts, and they were having Google Translation so they can speak. And myself and 2 other people who were actually the judges, and who were waiting for Google Translation to explain what. And that, for me, the lack of knowledge of English language is the biggest barrier in communication. Because when you're doing international crime, I mean, if it's local crime, you speak Greek. If it's international crime, you have to speak in English. You have to write in English, and you have to write in a way that other people will understand what you're writing in English. So your level of English should be at a certain point and above. So, have you seen these problems? Yeah, I mean, have you actually noticed those things in your research? That's my question. Sorry for taking too long. that's what I want to see. Have you noticed those things?
Yes.
You know? And the other thing is, have you noticed the gap between the fiscals and the police?
Between
Prosecutors. Yes. I mean, there's 15 years ago when I started, police reports were bad and the prosecutors were bad. Now the police are over here and the prosecutors are back there.
in terms of knowledge of digital
In terms of
forensics.
everything.
Oh, okay.
In terms of everything. I had experiences where I wrote a proof of concept report. It wasn't a forensic report. A proof of concept how to spoof a text message, and they dropped the case. They dropped the prosecution on a proof of concept because they hadn't picked up the phone to ask someone, the police, can someone do that? So the language barrier is one, but also the knowledge between those two institutions is a huge gap. And I want to see experience that as well. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, so for the first point, yes, absolutely, and thank you for raising it. During the diaries, the daily diaries of the professionals and the follow-up interviews, and a little bit, I think, in the focus groups again, this very much came up. Not just in the materials being in English, although that's huge. Like a lot of the data analysis programs, you have to be able to speak English to use it. So like Cellbrite and all the technical stuff tends to be in English, with a little bit of local language translation to get people started. But also when you're doing cross-border crime collaboration, if it's between somebody in France and somebody in Italy, they'll communicate in English as the common language. And so it's really essential to make sure that when they're using the term acquisition and they're speaking in English, they both have the same understanding of that word. And in our lexicon, we've got over 100 different words. We're trying to condense down to 100 very specific words or more. But also, so it's not just the technology that's in English, also the common social media and things like that. So if you're looking to get Facebook and negotiate with Facebook for data, then you're going to have to speak English there. And what else am I going to say? Oh, and also, like you said, all their kind of guidance and stuff is old, has been previously translated from English into the local language, and now we're looking back. What I'd say about that is that because we're augmenting our analysis with spoken words, so how they're using the terminology now in the local language, we're getting an understanding of how the meaning around the local use of the words. So it's not just this word's been translated from English and they're using it in a funny way. That there's a whole kind of conversational dialect and meaning behind the words there.
Do you want me to take a second bit?
Yeah, you can take a second bit.
Just one thing to add there was, I think there wasn't there an example from the data in Finland where they, what you're saying about the original words come in English and get translated into Finnish in this case. Sometimes what they do is sort of a Finglish, where they'll take the English word and then tack on a Finnish-ish ending to it to make it more palatable in the local context. Yeah, English as well. Yeah, so we have that too. That we're also so again, just kind of more to the point why we need a common vocabulary in this field. When it comes to, so you mentioned prosecutors. Unfortunately, the way the funding and the way that the research works, we're not able to include sort of the courts and the legal end of things. So to try to address that side of it, that's why we have, first of all, the research advisory board, so we have legal advisors in there, but also when it comes to the massive open online course, they will be one of our target audiences. So just to kind of help get a better understanding of what the process is, what the language is, and how all this works. Because I think some of the data did reveal that there were gaps in understanding on that end.
Can I add one little point of interest, because you're speaking specifically about Scottish, the fiscals in Scotland. What came up several times in the Scottish data and I did the interviews, was that there is a prosecutor in Scotland who's a digital forensic, he knows about digital forensics, he's quite well up on it, and it tends to be that the cops and the analysts will contact directly or ask other fiscals, other prosecutors to talk to that one prosecutor to get a handle on what they're trying to say. So if they're having kind of issues getting their point across, they're like, talk to this guy. And so you get this kind of informal process happening around the formal stuff in order to compensate for this misunderstanding.
But this is an incidental
it's entirely
it's
related.
a random thing.
Yeah.
Germany has specialist prosecutors who have their own team of digital forensic experts. They have their own labs like the police, and they do their own investigations. They take on all the major cases and they provide support to all the smaller cases around Germany.
One thing with that is you also have to take into mind the legal process within the country. So the UK and Scotland is acquisitorial, so we have it's police-led, the investigation, so there's police forensics, and then the prosecutors get fed the information, whereas in other countries such as Portugal, it's run by the judiciary, so you have the prosecutors having a more...
France and everything else.
Yeah, so you have a more active role, so it won't necessarily translate into the different countries.
But the problem that could be dealt with is that the prosecutors could have people who understand evidence in-house, and then they can say, look, this case, the probability of winning this case is 5%.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to spend £200,000 and 1,000, work hours to go after that, where someone at the end is going to get 100 hours of community service?
Yeah.
Because that's what's happening. That's what's coming. That's how the backlog in Scotland works. It's the small cases, not the big ones.
For sure, yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're fine, that's great.
Does
anyone else have any other questions? Green, and then our lady at the back. Perfect.
How did you end up with the particular group of countries that are now involved?
It's the same question. Perfect.
Okay. So I can address that one because that was my job at the beginning of this whole process. So, when you do European projects that are funded by the European Union, it's important to have a good representation of the various geographies of the EU. So part of it was, so we have Scotland and Norway and Finland in the north, and then we have Portugal in the south, and Czech Republic in the east, and then Greece also in the south. So we did that. It was a good sort of geographical spread. It also came down to who knew who and who was willing to be involved in the project, because you mentioned Germany earlier. I went to Germany. Germany said, no, we're fine. We got it all sewn up, we're okay, so that didn't work. It started because I had a colleague that I knew from Finland from a previous project. He knew people in Portugal. They said, have you spoken to the Greeks? And so part of it is who you know, but part of it is also who will say yes, and then also making sure we have a good spread of the EU.
Yeah, because it was an important part of our project to have both academic institutions and practitioner institutions. So within each country, you had to find practitioners who are willing to share the data.
Yeah.
I'm going to add to something there as well. I think what's quite good about the spread of countries that we've got vastly different processes in all of the countries, and therefore the research data that we're going to have in the professional development course will be valid for a lot of the other European countries. Will also have potentially similar processes within their own country, and therefore the courses that we're creating, they will be able to use them even though the research didn't take place in their country. They will still be able to upskill themselves and learn about the lexicon and the bias checking tool. Anyone else got another question? I think you were the same question. Yeah, fantastic. Lady in the Gila at the front.
Hello there. I was interested by the fact that you're actually taking, essentially, in fact, we've added another layer, English to the acquired language, back to English, back to the acquired language. If you're going to be trying to suss bias in that, good luck with that. But more importantly, does it also imply that in fact in some of these other languages which are non-English, that there will be some people who will be using certain words and combinations of words who will now have to learn a different way of describing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the implication?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, it may imply a change of standard practice, for sure. So, and I think this is where the training packages that we produce at the end will be very important. And we will be rolling those out to all of our partner countries in the first instance. But there's also an organization called CPOL, which is, organizes and coordinates police training across the EU. So we're going to be communicating with CPOL to make sure that it's also something that they could potentially send out more broadly across Europe. Yeah.
Can I also add that, although, just to add that the call for this common lexicon it wasn't something that was kind of decided by us as well. There's a European network of forensic science institutes, and it's part of their they've been asking for a while now that this kind of standardization standardized lexicon be developed for digital forensics and forensics as a whole, because they'd already noticed this disconnect between how different words are perceived across the different countries. So the institutions themselves are already kind of geared up to kind of change their practice or change their communication.
I suppose in the nature of it, digital crime does tend to be multinational.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, servers are, they can be in America or Ireland, aren't they? And then, yeah.
There was another question. Another question, yeah. The red, and then we'll go to jump to the back. Perfect, thanks.
I was just wondering if you could speak a bit more on the bias tool that you've been working on. Like, how do you define what bias is? Like, what is the process behind figuring it out?
Oh boy. Will I start and then you correct me? Yeah, okay. So the bias checking tool and all that, that's our computer scientist who's not here, but also, so I'll start from systemic bias and we'll go from there maybe. So our project is focusing primarily on systemic bias, not interpersonal bias. So we're not looking at instances of individuals being racist in what they're saying or taking bias in that way. We're looking at how the system itself can create but vulnerabilities to error and bias. So we're looking at perhaps the pressures that are placed on forensic analysts to stick to court times, or the hierarchical structures and so on, which is really hard to translate into a bias checking tool for written language. So that's something that we're currently kind of going over. But the basic tool as it is just now is it's based on common understandings of biased speech. So things like capitalization or excessive words like massively intelligent or whatever. So those kind of well-known things. It will be in each of the local languages, so that kind of takes it beyond the state of the art. But and it'll also include the words from the lexicon, which is our way of kind of integrating digital forensics into the bias tool. But it is something that we've had a lot of issues over trying to define how we instigate kind of systemic bias into something that analyses the written words. It's a work in progress, maybe I'd say.
Yeah, but and I think the way that we address the system element of that with the tool, because yes, the tool itself would be looking at a specific piece of text that a person had written. But for us, the issue is also how is that tool then integrated into the broader systems and processes, and making sure that as these professionals do their work, that this tool is employed at the right time to make sure that that written text isn't then leading to other bias down the road.
It's a really good question. We don't thank you for asking.
So we have one question that was sitting in the back, and then we maybe have time for one more question. Is there another one in the room? Perfect, we'll just go for yourself right now.
It's just a very simple one. I've been struggling here to keep up with you. What is the sixth country?
Oh, Norway. Yeah, so, sorry, that might be a little confusing. We didn't do any data collection in Norway. We have colleagues there from the Police University College of Norway, which is based in Oslo. So they directed the research that Amy talked about with the case study, the focus groups. But yeah, we're not doing any data collection in Norway. The lexicon will not be in Norwegian. Unfortunately, that was just a stretch too far.
Do we have one last question? Feel free. Jonathan, we've got a mic.
Sorry, my question was just, has the same Clarus system been rolled out to the rest of the UK legal forces as well?
Has it rolled out?
The whole Clarus system, the lexicon, whole system in England, Wales and Ireland?
Not yet, no. I mean, they would be part of the
dissemination.
the wider dissemination. Because, I mean, the systems are so different that down in England and Wales, they use independent labs for their analysis. They're not police labs. And so, it's looking to see where we can roll that out.
But I think we'll be liaising with organisations who could roll it out to the different jurisdictions in England and Wales. So that ideally, yes, first the UK, then the world. But to begin with, the 5 partner countries.
Could I also ask a very light-hearted question? You mentioned digital data from a smart fridge. What on earth could be used for this?
A lot. So nowadays you get smart fridges that can interface with your phone and your smartwatch, and they can send you reminders and calendar things and tell you when you're out of ice. And so things like that. And police, so bless them, frontline police officers, they're they're amazing, but they're not all very digitally aware. So they'll get told, find some potential kind of digital evidence, what is the potential for getting evidence from this scene. They'll see a smart fridge with a computer screen on it. They'll go, right, we'll have that, and we'll send it to the lab. And the lab's like...
If I may add on that one, it's not only that, it's the fact that if someone hacks your fridge that's connected to the internet, they know when you are at home. Also, you don't need to hack some of those devices. You can see on a platform called Sodan, where you're looking, it's a search engine for devices. And one that I was using often for examples is Wi-Fi enabled kettles.
Yeah.
And you have those kettles connect to your Wi-Fi, and Sodan can see. And I found one in the UK, and it showed at that point that the temperature on the kettle was 100 degrees, which means at that point someone had boiling or just boiled water. If you identify who that person is, you keep looking at that for a few days. You see when the kettle is quiet, and you know when there's nobody at home. That's when you burglar them.
There you go, we'll learn something today.
I mean, I think that's an excellent way to end this, talking about smart fridges and smart kettles. Thank you very much. Your questions have been absolutely brilliant. So I want to thank you all for coming along to our session. I also want to massively thank Hannah and Becky from the RSE, who have been brilliant in helping us get this all set up. So you have a wee postcard and a little QR code to sign up to our newsletter. We should hopefully have one coming out at the end of this month. And there's a link on the postcard to our website where you can find out more about us as well. And just if you do want to get in touch, our email is very simple. It is just clarus@dundee.ac.uk. But you can find all of that on the website as well. So thank you very much for coming, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Wednesday evening and the rest of your week.